The time is just gone 9:35 a.m. as we continue with the broadcast, and our focus is going to be on Sweden for the next few minutes. And we learned in January about the burning of the Noble Quran, and this took place outside the Turkish embassy in Stockholm, and this sparked anger in the Muslim world, and it led to weeks of protests and also for a boycott of Swedish goods. And this came against the leader, where the Consulate General of Sweden in Istanbul, saying that after Rasmus Paludan, who is the leader of the Danish far right political party Hardline, and he also has got Swedish citizenship, and he burnt the copy of the Quran. This is the image that is coming up on our screen right now, yeah, on Salam Media, and we will be talking shortly, or we are going straight away now to be joined by the Assistant Professor of Religion at the Uppsala University based in Sweden, Professor Emin Poljarević. Professor Amin, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you.
Yes, it is clear that this whole issue surrounding the burning of the Quran in Sweden in Stockholm, has created a lot of anger in the Muslim world. We've seen protests taking place also in Istanbul outside the Swedish embassy, and this also comes now with the Swedish appeals court, which said that police had no legal grounds to block the gatherings where protesters had planned to burn the Quran earlier this year. Just your reading into the situation, your analysis as far as this appeals court decision goes, and what is actually playing out in Sweden.
Well, yes. Well, thank you for that question. I think this lower administrative court ruling is not very surprising because they are interpreting the decision of Swedish police to not to allow Quran burning on the basis of absolute or almost absolute freedom of speech. So the ground on which Swedish police had banned the burning at that particular time was based on the risk of violence, not only the risk of violence locally, but also they were thinking there is a threat of terrorism from outside even, right? Which was actually conveyed to them by the state or secret police in Sweden. So that was the ground upon which they have made the decision, but the court deemed it not sufficient enough to obstruct or to limit the freedom of expression for this extreme politician.
Yes, but what is also clear is looking at Sweden, and when one looks at the politician in general, when we're looking at this far right hardline leader, and we know that he has got Swedish citizenship, and we know for a very, very long time that Denmark has been at the forefront of the whole question surrounding Islam and the burning of the Quran, and that has been taking on for a very, very long time. And looking at Sweden and how much is actually Sweden taking a lead from what is playing out in Denmark?
Well, yeah. So it's important to note that Rasmus Paludan has been convicted of hate speech in Denmark. So he's a convicted felon, you can say, in terms of his extremist views and so on and so forth. So he acquired also Swedish citizenship and tried to start a political party. Or he actually started a political party in Sweden, which participated also in the recent elections. So from last year. So the context within which these Quran burnings are taking place is also a reflection of the social and even political climate in Sweden. The issue is that Islamophobic winds, if you wish, have been blown from the south up to the north. That means from Denmark to Sweden in recent years, at least since 2010. This climate of Islamophobia has become much more tangible in Sweden, unfortunately. And since 2015, we have seen more rapid development of such Islamophobic climate, if you wish, in Sweden. And that has to do also with the context of this large migration in 2015, which has kind of overwhelmed both a lot of European countries, but in particular Germany and Sweden, with Syrian refugees and other refugees coming from East Africa and also Central Asia.
Yes. Now, how much of this has actually impacted or rubbed off on Swedish society when one looks at people like Paludan, who provokes rioting in Sweden, and we know he even went on a tour of the country, publicly burning copies of the Quran.
Well, the thing is, burning of the copies of the Quran is something this is a highly speculative, right? But would not have been allowed, let's say 15, 20 years ago in the country, right? So the public opinion and the media landscape have taken on this idea of protecting democracy and democratic, let's say, premises, out of which freedom of expression is one of those basic rights. So legal interpretation, or let's say, or judicial interpretation of the legal framework in Sweden has also swung that way. So the freedom of expression or freedom of speech in Sweden is not absolute. You're not allowed to display Nazi symbols, for instance, publicly. That's against the law and so on and so forth, because of the historical reasons and so on and so forth. But here we can see there are limitations in terms of inciting violence against a minority group or religious group or ethnic group would be illegal in Sweden, right? But then so burning of the Quran falls into this freedom of expression vis-a-vis the religious rights or rights not to be offended by Muslims. So they have these two colliding rights, which are, one is interpreted as being primary to the one of being protected from such insults or attacks. So
Yes.
that it's tricky when it comes down to the legal framework and interpretation.
Yes. Now we've seen within political circles in Sweden, where we've seen politicians, obviously, some politicians criticizing the Quran burnings, but at the same time defending the rights of freedom of speech. The key issue here is, how does one actually reconcile the two? On the one hand, you're saying that there should be freedom of speech, but on the other side, you're critical of actions like this.
So the prime minister who said these words was that we are against it, we don't like it, but the law is quite clear. So he would say, even if something is lawful, it doesn't have to be liked, or it doesn't have to be good, so to say, right? So there's this kind of discrepancy between what is morally or ethically right and what is legally allowed. So that's that kind of pretty clear distinction that he made there. And I think he also has a lot of support in the Swedish public when he said that. Obviously not amongst Muslims, that's quite clear, but amongst the majority non-Muslim population would support that statement.
Professor Amin, what does this actually do for Sweden in terms of its relationship with the Muslim world? Now, we know that Turkey has come out very, very strongly in its condemnation, and we've even seen the Turkish president, Recep Erdogan, saying that it is clear that those who caused such a disgrace in front of our country's embassy can no longer expect any benevolence from us regarding their application for NATO membership. Now, this has been a very, very strong statement that's come through from Turkey. And just to understand, how is this likely to play out with Sweden and its relationship with the Muslim world in general?
Well, I can tell you from the experience, from our own experience, traveling throughout the Muslim world and a lot of Muslim majority countries, I can see the shift in opinion vis-a-vis Sweden. So when I mentioned that I come from Sweden and so on and so forth, the eyebrows are immediately raised. They're like, what's going on in Sweden? It's because the Swedish reputation in Muslim majority countries has been tarnished. That's no doubt about it. That's kind of my first-hand experience. Now, how widely that is held, I don't know. I don't have empirical kind of evidence for that, but just instinctively, I see that people have had different opinions about Sweden, generally speaking, historically speaking, as a tolerant place, as a place where social welfare and social democracy have been quite strong and widespread, now has become a very ill thought of place among many Muslims in the world. And that's also reflected in its relationship with Turkey and this NATO membership process, which I think the political issues are more complex than that, right? But this definitely does not help Sweden, generally speaking. So for that reason, Swedish politicians and Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and other politicians have walking a tightrope. On one hand, playing to the audiences at home, to the public, saying, "Look, we are protecting, we are for freedom of expression," but on the other hand, saying that this is a wrong thing to do, and this is kind of a detrimental for social cohesion and so on and so forth. That's one side of it. And I think another side of it is that the Sweden seems to disregard the European Convention of Human Rights, and also it really disregards this international covenant of civil and political rights, which are really there to protect religious minorities and their sensibilities. And that doesn't seem to be playing out in the Swedish debate. Everything has become much more insular in its own public discussion vis-a-vis religious rights and also freedom of expression, where religious rights are somehow ignored and pushed to the side in favor of this absolute view of freedom of expression being the absolute right.
Yes, and just looking at us here in South Africa, and I'm aware that not very long ago we've had our own theological bodies, our United Ulama Council
Yeah.
of South Africa, that had actually met with the Swedish ambassador here in South Africa, expressing our concerns as to what is actually happening. And this meeting had taken place, and it's just now that we've seen the outcome of this court ruling, or what the Swedish court, the appeals court, had actually ruled. It's perhaps it's time to basically revisit. And I think many other countries around the world, many other bodies that need to actually take up this matter, so that this pressure on the Swedish government does not die down, and the momentum needs to be maintained, Professor Amin.
Yes, I think that's important. The international pressure is always something which I believe all countries are kind of sensitive to, and I would say especially Swedish government. But also, I think internally it's quite important for the minorities, religious minorities, to kind of pull together and help each other out in this sense to protect their own common religious rights of minorities. And in one case, for instance, from 2018, where the European Court of Human Rights has been ruled actually concerning a case where there was a kind of abusive attack on the Prophet of Islam, where the European Court actually confirmed the conviction of a person who by her statements had violated the rights of others to have their religious feelings protected. Actually, so I think European Court of Human Rights is something which would be interested in this type of case to and hopefully that will happen. But it remains to be seen if there's such an initiative would come from the civil society organizations or religious communities in Sweden, actually.
Yes, but also looking at from a religious perspective, we know that man plans and the Almighty Allah plans as well, and Allah is the best of planners. And we've seen in many instances right across the entire world where we've seen the type of Islamophobia, we've seen the attack on the symbols of Islam, whether it's a hijab, whether it's the burning of the Quran, the cartoons attack on our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as well, where a lot of it has actually backfired, and we've seen this huge interest in Islam. We've seen the growth of Islam, and I'm not too sure, in a country like Sweden, whether there are many people that, because of all this that is actually playing out, that they are actually expressing some sort of an interest in Islam, to learn about Islam and to learn about what Muslims are all about.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, and it's an empirical one. That means it needs to be researched. And so far, I haven't really noticed or seen the upswing, as you can see maybe internationally or through YouTube channels or the social media. because I haven't seen any major upswing, or at least I have not heard about it. So I don't really know what the case is on that front. But yes, we can say generally, globally speaking, you can see the upswing in Islamophobia generally. I mean, in both in India and China, North America, but also other countries, European countries, where you would have a greater and growth of intolerance vis-a-vis Muslims and Islam, broadly speaking.
Well, Professor Amin, we'd like to thank you. We say shukran to you for taking time out and talking
Thank
to
you.
us and unpacking what you have this morning with us right here on Salam Media. We wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.
Assistant Professor of Religion at the Uppsala University based in Sweden. We've got Professor Emin Poljarević with us this morning against the Swedish court that rejected the banning of the Quran, and obviously looking at the whole issue surrounding the involvement of the police. And with that, we're going to go for a break. We've got a few more minutes and we will wind down and take us through the end of this morning's edition of News and Views right here on Salam Media.